postgraduate student and researcher and teaching assistant at UM. Um, yeah, I wrote this when I first started my master's course in English literature at Universiti Malaya. And the idea behind it, we were given an assignment by Dr. Fiona Lee. She asked us, one of the first assignments she gave us was to write a language autobiography. This is where you talk about your relationship to a language. So it's a bit like you're writing about your life, but your life in relation to a language. And it had to be about your relationship to English. In most cases, when you read language autobiographies, it's about English as a second language. In my case, English, because I come from a background where I have English teachers in my family, I grew up speaking English. So I made it a little bit different. I made it about the place of English in Malaysia in a multicultural society. We also had to connect it to the theory that we were learning. So on the one hand, we had to write about ourselves. On the other hand, we had to connect it to the different theories of Malaysian literary figures like Salleh Ben Joned, Lloyd Fernando, people like that. And I didn't really know how to do this. But then I hit upon this idea that I could make my story a conversation with another writer. I asked Dr. Fiona whether I could do this, and she said, go ahead. The problem is that the writer in question, Salleh Ben Joned, has already passed away. So I had to make it into a kind of, not a ghost story, but I had to make it into a story where I speak to the quote-unquote ghost of Salleh Ben Joned, but I make him a literary construct. So I play with this idea of him being a character. And I tried to, and that meant that I learned a lot more about not just Salleh's theory, but also about his personality. Well, I think that one of the things that happens when you are presenting research is that it often comes across as very dry. And so as a result of that, academic ideas, intellectual ideas, they don't get transmitted to the rest of society. So you have two things. You have, on the one hand, a lot of academic research that's being done, but then it stays within a certain elite group of people. And then on the other hand, you have storytelling that is kind of just for fun, but doesn't explore maybe deeper ideas, or does, but not with a level of depth. And so what I tried to do is I took complex ideas, but I gave them a narrative. Ideas that would normally be abstract and dry, but by giving them a story, you're giving the reader something to follow. It's a little bit like if you have a necklace. You have all these little beads, right? And individually, they don't really make sense. They're unique in themselves, but you'd have to look at them. But if you put them through a thread and you thread them together, they form a coherent pattern that you can follow. And so that's kind of what I tried to do here. I took abstract literary ideas about that. It's basically about language and multiculturalism. What is the place of English in a multicultural society? How is that affected by our experiences with colonialism and the post-independence period? But then I try to link it to a storytelling idea so that the audience doesn't get bored, basically. There are a lot of debates about the use of English, and on the one hand, using it for practical reasons, on the other hand, seeing it as a colonizer's language, and then the debates about the use of Malay, the use of Chinese, and so on. And a lot of this, people don't realize what they're actually debating is they're not debating language. They're debating the question of identity in this case. If you look at how English has changed, it was introduced through colonialism, but what happens is that colonized people from all our different backgrounds, whatever race or we may identify with or group, we take the language and then we modify it, we make it our own, and it becomes something different from what it was originally. And so the colonizer cannot lay claim to that. That's ours, belongs to us. And so it's an important reminder of the fact that wherever our origins may be, whether it's in terms of language or whether it's in terms of historical origins and who we are, we grew up here, or even if we didn't grow up here, we live here. And as a result of that, whatever we bring from different cultures from around the globe or around this region, they transform in this place because we're all living together. We have to figure out how to be able to manage that. And we should not view that as a problem, but we should view it as an opportunity. The other thing that I was trying to get at was that a lot of this happens organically, and the best social solutions and things don't happen with state intervention. They happen when people are allowed to interact with each other and be themselves. This goes back to your question of storytelling. That's why storytelling is such an appropriate medium for this type of thing, because it allows us to express ideas in a more organic way. And that's why I use the image of coconut candy rather than what people usually use to describe multiculturalism, which is the idea of rojak. Usually when people talk about Malaysian culture, they say rojak culture. But rojak implies that the things are still kind of separate, that you have a sauce you put over it, but it's kind of separate things. What I was saying is not actually that at all. You have these different ingredients, but then they're brought together into something unique that you can't separate, really. We can't really be separated. And that's where the coconut candy idea comes in. I would love for literature and language, and if there's anything that I hope it does, I hope it encourages people to be more open, but also I hope it encourages people to be more interested and see the importance of language and literature. And you and I both probably know this, that doing literature is something that's underrated in our society, with ours, as well as with the arts more generally. The study of literature is the most, I believe, most important, the key subject in the humanities is the subject of study of literature, and below that is study of history. If we take those two things seriously, that's the only way we can build an informed and mature democratic society. Whereas a society that is uninformed about the ability to analyze literature and is uninformed about the ability to not just read history, but assess and understand history and understand different viewpoints, that society is going to be a society that will not be able to deal with the problems it has.